Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Van Hemert. This is Beltline to Broadway. I am broadcasting live from I'm going to just call it my New York studio now that I've kind of moved in. But live from the Broadway Makers Marketplace, which is this glorious, I keep calling it a palace of theater fandom.
It is.
Which
it is a palace. It's like a mecca.
Mecca of theater fandom. And I am here with Ken, whose last name I'm going to really screw up. I should have asked you before.
It's fun. Cerniglia.
Okay,
Yes.
Cerniglia.
Pronounce it the Italian way.
So it sounds very Italian.
Yeah, right.
And who is a dramaturg, and I'm so happy to sit with you because, as I told you before we went on air, I think dramaturgs are so necessary, usually the smartest people in the room, and I would advocate for every show everywhere to have one. It would make my job as a theater critic so much easier. So thank you for being here with me.
I'm thrilled. We're, behind the scenes folks. So to get a chance to talk about our work with more people is a treat.
Well, and when it works, when kind of like all of the cogs in the wheel are coming together on a show, you really can tell when that dramaturgy piece is there. At least I can, so
we hope.
we hope.
Although, I like to say when we do our jobs well, no one in the audience should know what we did.
Okay, well, fair.
Right?
Fair,
because everything else should be shining the right way.
So, you are dramaturg on so many amazing shows. We're going to talk about all things Disney, because who doesn't love Disney? And we have so much Disney merchandise in the store.
Yes, come see the Disney merchandise.
So we'll talk about that in a second. But Hadestown, you're working on a little show. Maybe you guys heard of it. Hadestown, maybe not.
Yeah. Under the radar.
Now touring the country.
Yes,
on tour,
in Boston right now.
Tour.
Yes.
We're going to get it at our Durham Performing Arts Center next year, which is very exciting. But, one question I get asked so often, especially from my friends who aren't in the theater, is what does a dramaturg actually do? So what is it that you do?
Every time I get asked this question, I'm like, I'm going to come up with a new analogy. And,
a new thing.
I heard something recently, now I should remember where the source was, but someone talking about a dramaturg as a tailor, right? Not necessarily like the clothes designer or the fabric maker, but someone who can sort of take something, there's a vision for it there, but then help make it to fit. Right?
Yes.
Make the thing to fit the wearer, but also the project, the goal. Like there's a vision there, there's a voice there, but someone who's a tailor is sort of an expert in making things fit. Right? And so knows the craft of that, doesn't have the vision for, what the clothes are, the colors of the thing, but like whatever you got, I'm gonna make it fit.
I love
that. So I'm like, that's my new favorite one too. But I've talked about it before, like a curator or like an editor, right? But for the theater, like that sort of work of like knowing how the parts fit together, knowing the fundamentals of the craft. That's what dramaturgy is. Sort of like the definition of it is like what are the structures of meaning in making a play or a drama, right?
And does it change from production to production? So for example, we're seeing a lot of Steel Magnolias. So if if Temple Theater is doing Steel Magnolias and they have one vision for the show,
yes,
does that dramaturgy piece change from Theater B, who may have a completely different take on it, even though the script is the same?
Yes, that's a very good question. So dramaturgs can specialize, but there's sort of two things that we can do other than being like, literary manager, and I can talk about that. But in terms of dramaturging a play, right? So there is production dramaturgy, which is a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Often, which is taking a play that already exists and then dramaturging the production. So working with the director, the producer, the design team, then the actors, then to just be like, where did this play come from? What were the original circumstances of like, who's the author? What was the impulse for this play? Like, what was the original audience like? What was this thing wanting to do in its time and place when, Steel Magnolias, for example, was written?
Right.
And then before it was a movie, it was a play. And why are we doing it now? That kind of thing. And then to work then with like that context, like the text and context, that's what the dramaturg focuses on mainly, and structures of meaning. And so then to have those conversations, like, are we all on the same page? And it's a different kind of thing than, producer, writer, director. Those are the leads. Like the producer is the lead on making the event happen, finding the money, getting the thing, making it happen. The director is the vision for this production.
Visionary.
The vision. And then the author is the voice. What's your worldview and what do you want to say? And so then the dramaturg needs to understand that and help facilitate all of those things and asking the hard questions about why this play in this place in this time for this audience, why here, why now? And like constantly coming back to those questions just to make sure, like, to keep everyone honest. Like obviously, like a producer, a writer, a director will have that impulse to, want to bring it to the stage. A director will be like, I love this play, I've always wanted to do it this way, whether it's a classic or what have you. And so then, when I'm working with a director, I'm like, let me be your sounding board. So let me be your first audience.
Yes.
Like shoot me your ideas and let me then ask you questions about it and help refine that thing that you want. And then keep you honest about it. Is this still the mission of the show? Is this still what you want to do?
I love that.
And then just to bring in, other resources. Most of our backgrounds are in theater history, dramatic literature, all those kind of semiotics, structures of meaning, all of that, critical theory, all, those things that I can bring in. And I'm just like a generally curious person. So anything I read is automatically relevant. But also curating that information, right? It's not about like bringing a truckload of research over. I mean, that was sort of old days when like not everyone knew how to use a library, unfortunately. But in that internet age, like any of us can look up anything at any time,
right.
So, like find essential facts, information. So really the work of the dramaturg with respect to research on the new production, Steel Magnolia, is like, where is it set in the South? Like, who are these people? What is it like? What's relevant, in terms of representation of women in Steel Magnolias then? And like, where are we now in conversation about women in society? Right. What are the pressing questions? What are roles of women? How do we engage with this period and sort of do it justice, but also make it now? I mean, the thing about like a movie or a book, magazine that gets published, produced in a certain place and time. So you can go back and watch a movie of Steel Magnolias, which I like to do because those performances are amazing.
Those are iconic.
But I always watch it at that point in time when the movie was released. I always have that in mind.
Right.
When we're doing a play, when we're in the theater, we always, no matter when the play was written, we always have to stand behind it.
Absolutely.
Tonight. We're always doing it tonight. We're saying something live tonight. So we can't just rely on like, well, in this time, it's like, how are we standing behind this? Like some plays don't need to be produced anymore because the thing they originally wanted to say is just no longer relevant or like rings sort of deaf in terms of cultural sensitivities there. So hopefully the dramaturg will be engaged in that conversation with the makers to be like, let's make sure we're engaging our audience now when we're creating a relevant piece of theater for tonight.
Well, and I love, right before we went on air, we were talking about contextualizing the work.
Yes.
I think it's really important to contextualize the work, and not all theaters, especially once obviously if you're talking about a Hadestown, they've got the budget and the insight and the stakes to focus on this, whereas a lot of the regional theaters, community theaters, don't have those budgets and might cut corners, but it's as important at, I think, the community and regional level as it is at the upper levels when you're contextualizing work. I think.
I would think so too. And often,
we need dramaturgs.
Sure, like a dramaturg, not just advocating for like more work for me and my colleagues, but I also feel like, the argument I'll make to producers or people who are trying to find a line item for the dramaturg is to say like it's a good investment in the quality of the work you're ultimately doing, and I usually say like it'll save you money. Spend the money on this now so you can deliver something that hopefully just connects better, right? Everyone shines a little better. It's more thought through. Bring on a dramaturg as early as possible, right? And like we'll work on a fee schedule that's appropriate for what you're doing, right? I've worked on like very small things where everyone gets paid the same amount. Everyone gets paid $50 and we all just do it because it's important thing to do. and we do it, but like I'm there as a line item because people I'm working with value the role of the dramaturg. Now you can have other shows like you can have a director with a dramaturgical sensibility or other people. And Hadestown's a good example because our director Rachel Chafkin is also a fantastic dramaturg.
Oh yes.
But we're working with a first-time dramatist who's writing book music and lyrics all by herself. And Rachel also has to direct the show and work with the designers and do all those things. So it was just like to have another point of view in the room, to have more support, and to have someone in there whose only job is to do the dramaturgy of the work, to make sure the dramaturgy is getting full. Yes,
for sure. And I do have to say, I saw Hadestown last night. It just hit me in such a different way. I don't know if it's just post-pandemic or post-Trump, I don't know what, but it really just was such a moving piece of theater. I hope everybody will see this now that it's going on the road and all over the country, because it's really a beautiful piece of theater.
Oh, thanks.
And it's different.
Thanks. Please buy tickets, hadestown.com.
Go buy tickets. Now, how long are you with the show? So do you come in at the beginning and it's kind of like that pre-production, those pre-production meetings, or do you stick with the show like Hadestown, for example, and revisit it? And did things change after kind of the pandemic?
No, we didn't. Luckily, the show's still relevant through pandemic and post-Trump. But for example, on the tour, the set changed, right? And we have really different actors in the principal roles. So like some of how things read are a little bit different. And so, while the show is done, like Anais didn't do any rewriting, there were a couple like arrangement things that changed that were pretty fun in the process. Because anytime you take a break from something, you come back to like, what about this?
Yeah.
So I was around a bit in studio rehearsals, but mostly just, for me, I'm such a fan of the show too. And to be a cheerleader and to meet the new cast and connect with them and, do a little storytelling about like where this thing came from and just to be a little bit, I was trained as a theater historian. So that's always important to me too, is looking at what we're doing, not just for now, but for legacy. Like we're creating something that's going to go on the shelf of theater history.
Yes.
And that's, that thing is really important to me too. And how do we acknowledge what's come before and be the support of what will come after?
All right. So as the mom of two children who both went through English classes through high school, I have helped them with my share of annotating and analyzing. And although I love it, they hate it. Most people, when they look at literary analysis or dramatic analysis, they would compare that to, maybe having a root canal or something.
Sure. It's not up your alley. It can seem dry.
So why dramaturgy? And why that aspect of theater versus some other aspect of theater for you?
It's a great question. So, like many people, I came to theater first as like going and then performing. I sang in the children's choir and we did little plays, and then I did some more traditional theater starting in high school and then college. And when I got to college as a psych major at UC San Diego, but one of my first quarter there, I took a theater class and I was like, this is going to be part of my life somehow. I just knew it. It wasn't even like I decided. It was like, oh, I recognized the calling. Like the universe was calling to me and said, you will be doing something in theater. And I eventually double majored. So I graduated with degrees in psychology and theater. And I emphasized performing in my major, but also directed a little bit, and I produced, and just was thinking like the bigger things. But always, I was that kid who's always, why? But why? Yeah, that's sort of like bigger. So I was like a born philosopher. I'm like, but why? What does that mean? Why are we here? Is there a God? Do we exist? Like, right? Where are we in the universe? And that's just sort of my orientation to theater too. And that, the way my mind worked too was like, I was always the kid that was like noticing the continuity errors in films, right? Like I just had that level of detail orientation to the way I view the world.
Thinking.
Yeah. But I know, not everyone's the same. I recognize like, oh, that's that's just part of the way I'm a learner in the world, is looking at details and how they fit into the whole, and seeing and synthesizing information and finding patterns. Like I just have always done that naturally. So when I went to graduate school, I was like, I'm going to be a theater professor. So I went to programs in theater history and criticism, which left, I have like to read a ton and write a ton, but I wanted to go to places that had producing departments, because the reason I wanted to study theater is because I loved doing theater and being in the theater. And when I went to my master's degree at Catholic University in DC, I took a formal dramaturgy class, and I was like, I'm a dramaturg, right? Like
that's what
I was just sort of like, that's the thing. And also, practically speaking, I could still participate in making theater as a dramaturg, because the time commitment was a little bit less than being, performing in a show, although I still did some of that. And certainly directing or stage managing, we just have to be there all the time. Like as a dramaturg, I could do some of the, like you say, pre-production work. And then, come and initial table work, for those of you who know how rehearsals work, you often start with table work, ask the questions, study the text, all the things. And then I could leave for a while as things were getting worked out in staging, and sort of come back during run-throughs when all the parts are put back together, and being an ally of the vision and the voice to be like, I knew what we were trying to do. And then come back and see it during run-throughs and be like, okay, this thing seems to be achieving it. These are where their holes are, because, the job of the director is to get into the making and arrangement of all the trees. And you have to necessarily some sight of the forest. And so I'm the forest manager, right? Like I come back in and I'm like, I'm seeing the forest, right? And I'm also trying to see like the play within the vision, but also like the theater within the community. Right, we're doing this play not in isolation, but like what's going on in our town right now, what's going on in the world, how are people going to come to this, how do we welcome people into the theater, to let them know what we're doing, and to welcome them to suspend their disbelief with us for an hour or two, right? And so we just have that communal experience. And so I'm asking all those questions when I kind of come back, and then I'm just like in those, note sessions, and trying to hear where the designers are, and just try to like put that all back, so that when I do give some feedback, it's informed. It's not just like coming in and giving notes, but it's like informed, like, how about this? And I usually try to ask questions instead of give statements.
and I love the idea of theater. When I think of theater criticism, and a lot of people have had discussions around why theater criticism, why are theater critics necessary? We've heard those conversations a lot in our area lately, and one of the answers to that question is to be that historian and to document the theater's connection to its community. So I love that you say that, because it's not in isolation. So
and I'm thinking about the theater critics too, right? Like this is a profession, this is a craft, to come and see a piece of theater and to put it into context. And in the profession of journalism, right, you need to address readers, you need to sell papers, you need to whatever you need to do, but like this is journalism too. You're reporting on an event that's happening in the world, and you're analyzing it, and giving an opinion about it, whether to see it or not. And I feel like it's bad for the theater that theater critics are having fewer opportunities to earn a living from this craft, because it's really important. And I'm not one of those that's like, the theater critic's job is to just like tell us good things. I'm like, no, a theater critic's job is to assess what we have brought them. And so my job on the dramaturg's end is like, I want to make the theater critic's job easier.
I love that.
Just so like, let me ask the hard questions first before the critic comes in. So like, I'm trying to think of what the critics will like, see, and like see some weak spots, see some strengths, and be like, can we shore up some of the weak spots, before the critics. So like, can see a lot of strong, and nothing's ever perfect. Like there will be things that are there to criticize, right? And they should be. But hopefully fairly, like hopefully we've done enough of our homework that we can put forth something that's worthy of our audiences and a critic's thoughtful response.
Absolutely. Well, and let's talk Disney for a second, because
Okay.
so many theater, there's such a crossover between theater and Disney and theater. And
Sure.
they have made their mark for sure on the whole Broadway landscape, which has trickled down everywhere. Um, isn't there, I think a lot of times when you look at anything Disney, and, in my house, I have two Disney kids who are obsessed with High School Musical, all of the animations.
Musical.
Yes. Um,
That took over my life for a couple of years, but
Mine too. Mine too, Ken. But a lot of times, as parents, as consumers, we might look at these things and kind of think they're kind of flat. But from a dramaturg's perspective, is there a through line? What would surprise people as you're dissecting some of these stories that Disney is telling?
What would surprise people? That's interesting. A lot of people are surprised that Disney employs dramaturgs. I'm like, yes, that is true. Now we go by different names. Creative executives, story supervisors, that sort of thing. But the dramaturgical process, I'm proud to say, has been part of the Walt Disney Company for 100 years.
A long time.
Walt Disney is a storyteller and a really obsessive one about all the parts and how they fit together and how they reach the market. And the whole company forever has been like, how do we make the best possible art and also have a profitable business? It's been that way from the beginning, right? And it's with some tension there too. But really, I have to say, working for the company for 16 years in the theatrical division run by Tom Schumacher, it was a great opportunity. First of all, like amazing, and also a Disney fan, but to be able to come into it and have that liturgical work be so valued, so needed, attention to process, attention to quality, and attention to something that was always something really important to me. I don't know if it's like growing up Catholic, but like that sort of like universal, like it's for everybody. Everybody is welcome here. And that was the Disney mission too, like creating the highest quality theater for the widest possible audience. And that to me, I'm like, yes, I want to do that in everything I do.
Yes.
And increase the welcome out there. So yeah, I mean, it's super rigorous, and in terms of like my job was mostly to facilitate the adaptation of work that was often, coming from film, and translating it to the stage and actually breaking it apart and putting it back together for the stage. Because it's not easy, right? There are different storytelling techniques.
Completely different meanings.
And there are different, times. When was the... And often like those things that we were adapting were also based on something else. Lots of fairy tales that are public domain. Other people have interpreted them. What was the Disney take on it? And what should we do with it now? How's it going to speak to us now? We launched Little Mermaid on Broadway in 2008, and that was nearly 20 years after the film was made. There were other things to say about Ariel and her role there, and fantastic director Francesca Zambella was like, Ariel cannot be saved by like a prince and like a big boat and like puncturing a big monster. She's got to do something else. And so, in the stage version, Ariel saves herself.
Yeah.
By killing her aunt. But it's fine.
It's all good.
She deserved it.
It's all good.
She was really mean.
She was super mean.
Yeah.
Well, and what I love about Disney is they're very, Eric Woodall and we've had many conversations about representation on stage.
Yes.
When he talks to me about representation on stage, he will often tell me that he learned how important representation is in casting through his work with Disney.
Yeah,
so
Eric's amazing. Eric's such a partner for so long, and just like a brilliant mind. I'm so thrilled about his new chapter in his career.
Yes, we are too.
But part of that too, in Little Mermaid in particular, got a casting award for that recognition of how we all, and Eric and Tara, like approached the casting and who was brought in and who was considered for the roles. And so you saw this family. It was like all colors and shapes and sizes, and there was a family, and no one asked any questions, right? It just was how we tell stories on stage, and we need to be inclusive on stage. So like, the goal is ultimately, it depends on the story you're trying to tell, but ultimately, particularly in a fairy tale, when we're all have to like use your imagination anyway, there aren't really mermaids. But in the story there are, and this is what they look like, and this is their family, and so everyone in the audience can see themselves in one way or another up on stage somewhere.
And to me, I feel like theater does have a role in changing hearts and minds, and kids are much more accepting and lovely than some of their adult counterparts. But I think that's something that Disney Theatricals does so well, is they kind of help the adults even flex those empathy muscles a little bit. So I
hope
love that.
so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're huge Disney people in my house, so we could talk Disney all day. I also feel like, though, that the dramaturg kind of helps. I feel anyway that helps the theaters from tripping over themselves and kind of getting in trouble, especially as we kind of enter this new, we see white American theater movement.
Absolutely.
Because there is such, I don't even want to say sensitivity, but there is such a reckoning that's happened in American theater now, that me, the dramaturg, can really help producers and presenters navigate the work that they're presenting and how that reads in 2021. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And we've been talking about that a long time. And while I was at Disney, we were, in many levels, because we were also had a lot of shows we were creating or adapting for licensing and sending them out to schools, not with us, right? Like the materials themselves had to have, so we would create performance guides and production handbooks for high school teachers, middle school teachers, not assuming they have any background in theater, but like some of these stories, like we need to talk about this first before you produce this. These are the things you have to think about. These are like heavy themes. This is, these are ways to think about inclusive approaches to casting. And some of the shows we did, we like, you may not have in-house, and you probably don't have in-house all of the cultural competencies and cultural expertises that you need for any given piece of theater. So part of the role of the dramaturg is to be like, who's in the room, who's missing from the room, who needs to be a part of this conversation, and work to bring in those consultants to, have a check as you're developing your production. And it's like, it has this ringing, right? Because like, language is evolving all the time, cultural sensitivity is evolving all the time, and the goal of theater is to create an open, empathetic space where we can hear other people's stories. The fundamental act of theater is an actor stepping into a character. That's a fundamental act of empathy. And so when we go see that live and in person, we are encouraged to also put ourselves in those places. And, unless you're doing a one-person show that you wrote and directed, like about yourself, which I saw yesterday, Ruben Santiago Hudson, Lackawanna Blues. It's amazing. And it closes on Friday. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's so great.
It is masterful storytelling at a whole different level.
Sure. And he plays many characters, right? He's playing himself as a kid, but also all these other characters with such empathy and grace. I was transformed yesterday seeing that. But this is the thing we always have to think about. What is the sensitivity? And if you're representing an experience that's outside of your life experience, who's in the room to help you through that? To keep you, to do a truth-telling check on you and your imagination into another's experience. Like that has to happen. We all have to imagine ourselves into others' experience, but we want to do so with grace, with intentionality, with sensitivity, and with love. So in order to do that, you need more information. So that it has to come to the table, and you got to like check it out. And yes, theater should be entertaining because that's also the way to the heart. But it's got to be truthful in its representation, and sensitive and welcoming. So you need to do that with cultural consultants.
Oh yes. All right. So we are sitting in this palace of theater fandom.
Yes. I love it.
which I love. By fans, for fans. And it's really theater inspired merch, which I love. People connect to the stories they see on stage and they want a piece of it. They want that memory. They want that. They want to hold a piece of it with them, which I love. So, talk to me about how you've seen. I mean, nobody's more crazy than the Disney fans. I know that because I got a couple in my house. Talk to me how fandom has evolved as you've seen it working for a company like Disney over 16 years.
Yeah, it's really, this is an interesting story. So Disney's built its brand really on this highest quality that comes with a pretty extensive amount of control, right? Just to make sure that like every representation of Ariel looks the same, feels like Ariel, and so when Disney started to do its theatrical productions, it was still Disney producing them. Yes. Right? So then we who work for Disney got to make sure quality control was there. But in every adaptation to the stage, what we discovered is that like the fans actually have a big embrace of multiple versions. Right? So the thing that we present on stage is not exactly like it was in the film. It should represent what's exciting about the film, the kind of emotional truth of the source material, but it's got to be its own thing, and fans can embrace that. And when Disney decided to start licensing its musicals for other people to produce, there's a little bit of trepidation because there's no way to control that out there. Like, what is going to be the role of? And so we kind of had to step in. I was lucky enough when I started Disney in 2003. It was just right at the beginning of when like Beauty and the Beast and Aida were going out into licensing. But I think what we ultimately proved, hand-holding with the company was like, can we do this? Can we have like kids out in schools producing these shows? Is that, it's one thing to be able to like, watch Belle on the film and Beauty and the Beast and love that for, the 90-minute experience. It's another thing to be able to go to the parks and to like meet Belle, right? Like that's super cool. It's live, Belle is amazing.
That's
and the thing, like that Belle's just like, she works so hard to meet all her fans, at every park around the world at the same time. But that's its own experience. But then like to be able to get in your school Beauty and the Beast Junior when you're 11 years old and you get cast as Belle and you get to be Belle, that's a whole other level of engagement with character. And it's not like a 2-hour experience watching a film. It's not a one-day thing at the park. You're talking weeks and weeks of rehearsals and then performances and then like that and like that's sort of over. So in terms of the evolution of fandom, like now being able to do all of these Disney shows in your schools and, have that organic experience and to like make your productions your own. And that it's sort of been out there now for like almost 20 years and like, it's fine, right? These kids are going to do their own production of the Aristocats Kids and it's going to be maybe a hot mess, but they're going to love it and it doesn't matter. Right?
Well, and it's about process. It's not really about, they're not going to put on a Broadway show.
And that's what we finally demonstrated. That it's going to be their engagement with these characters and these songs and like, these stories. And they get to do it and they just love it. And they'll always have that experience of taking something, a foot in the door really is what we said. Like, because Disney is ubiquitous, and sort of love it or hate it, it's there. If we can use Disney as an open door to creating arts programs, supporting arts programs and arts in schools, then we're going to do that because that's essential for those of us, in the company who work in theater. We're like, that's what we love. We think theater is good for everyone at some level. And if we can open doors with Disney shows, then like, great, then go do other shows, like do other kinds of arts. But if this can be like, Disney supports the arts in schools, done. That's why we should do it.
Arts education matters so much. Now you're speaking my language, so yes. And that's what I love about it. And I do think it is a gateway for so many kids to not necessarily pursue a career in the arts, but to glean those nuggets of wisdom that come from participating in the arts. It's just so important.
Absolutely. And I think in the internet age, fans are quite savvy. Like the positive side of social media is that people get to connect over things they're enthusiastic about and share their love and be able to and the fan created, whether it's fan fiction or fan art or now like fan merchandise, like to be able to sort of create that and share your love and like not just be in our culture, because so much is at us, consumers of entertainment, but also to be like producers of response to those things that we're enthusiastic about. That's good for everyone.
It is. So are you a collector of, I have a friend, we go to the theater, she collects pins from every show or magnets from every show we go to. So are you a collector of merch?
I'm not a huge collector of merch. I'm an obsessive collector of programs, and I have too many, and I have to figure out how to call them. Now, also because of like IBDB, we can find most of those things online now that we went to. So I don't have any more room in my apartment for programs, so I'm gonna have to call them. Yeah, I'd like to get like some choice things, and I've been very blessed to have worked on a number of shows that I'm very excited about. So I have stuff from those shows,
All
that
right,
I've worked on.
Favorite collectible from a show that you've worked on? Favorite memento?
Oh, that's good. Gosh, we had this really cool from Little Mermaid. We had this like really cool glass globe thing that I think is like super nifty. And then we've had, some gifts that were like opening night gifts that were very clever given from different people. I have some nifty posters signed by like from Hunchback by like Stephen and Alan and Peter who made Hunchback of Notre Dame. So those are
Broadway.
juicy.
That is a Broadway.
Oh my gosh, I love that show so much. It wasn't the right time when we had it together to bring it to Broadway, but it exists. It's out there in the world. Other people do it, and actually, I think it's still running in Tokyo.
Okay.
And may like come back in some international production. So we'll see. It was done originally on stage in 1999 in Berlin, and then they went back at it and did a new version of it. Scott Schwartz's production, and that's the one that exists now, and I love it. And I also got to work with Patrick Page on it for a couple of years, and then he went right into Hadestown. Patrick Page, I'm like the biggest fan of Patrick Page. His approach to stage villains is unparalleled.
Brilliant, right?
It's just brilliant. He finds a way into this like empathy for these villains that's just like, how do you do that? And he's magic.
He's magic.
He's just he's a magician.
Well, theater is magic. Hadestown is magic. He was magic in Hadestown last night.
Yay, and he's back.
Yeah, and he's back.
Yes.
So definitely a performance you don't want to miss if you have not seen that performance. This is so much fun. I'm so glad that you sat down with me while I took up space in this.
It's great.
Palace.
This is exactly what this space should be used for. We're gonna pop up shop like underground in Columbus Circle, and the Broadway fan takeover of a bar. It's wonderful. The programming. I'm so glad you're doing these podcasts from here, because like that's exactly what should happen.
Well, it's so much fun, and it's been so great to work with the team here and truly to be a maker, because I'm not a maker in the sense that I create anything, except I'm a theater fan and a podcaster. But
you make
to
podcasts.
Be part of this amazing collective community, it's making. But to be part of this, it's such a amazingly special creative community, and I love it. So I'm already planning my next trip back.
Yes.
So.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me.
It's my pleasure.
For doing this.
Thank you for asking about dramaturgy.
Oh, please, Raleigh people, it will help me a great deal review your shows if you hire a dramaturg. So I'm a big believer. And actually, it's kind of funny, but there was a production, Lauren Kennedy from Theater Raleigh did a production of the Scottsboro Boys. And
I love that musical.
I
love it.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. Susan Stroman's production was like off the charts.
And Lauren brought
Mm.
in a dramaturg to work with the cast, to work with the crew, to work on the production. And so that collective effort,
Yeah.
it's probably one of the most brilliant things that has been produced in Raleigh in in many years.
I'm so
And
glad
that was
to
the
hear
first
that
time where I
happened.
was like, yes, this is why everybody needs a dramaturg show.
Well, that's important, right? It's a historical piece. It deals with very sensitive race relations. And, it's a very sad chapter in American history. And yet, the storytelling of it through musical theater, through the old, like, minstrels, right? And that's can be explosive into itself. And yet, there's something about it if you can engage it sensitively and ask the hard questions and deliver it to an audience, pretty transformative.
And then to have those talkbacks afterwards.
Yeah.
So to have the dramaturg actually lead some of those talkbacks with the audience afterwards is really good.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Well, thank you for hanging out with me. We've got one more interview from this glorious palace of fandom, the Broadway Makers Marketplace. We have that coming at 4:00 with Chrissy Layton. She's just amazing, right?
She's kind of, I think she's actually a goddess. She's just like taken human form because she shines.
She does.
She's a lovely human.
She's so she is a sparkling diamond, and I don't say that.
Yeah,
I don't say that lightly.
It.
So I cannot wait to sit with her and talk about A Chorus Line and Company and all of the amazing work she's doing for arts advocacy and theater advocacy. So come back at our con and we'll continue the conversation. So thanks everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye.